So hi, I'm Jody. For those of you I haven't met, welcome to IHS for Donut Club. Yeah, I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about where we kind of came up with this idea. Our tagline is "We do history," right? So we like to tell Hoosier stories, but what are Hoosier stories other than the aggregation of individual stories? And it struck me that how people tell their own stories is always different. There are a lot of different methods people use for doing it. Sometimes they're things we're all familiar with, like they write a biography, they do an oral history, they keep scrapbooks, you name it. But there are other ways we transmit culture that are less obvious. I think we're doing it, but we don't always do it in a way that's intended to pass down history. And so it struck me growing up, my family's Polish. I came over in the 1920s, and my grandmother, who was born in Poland, came here, and my mother was basically raised by her grandmother. And my grandmother used to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. I mean, my mom would talk about how, this was back in the day where you'd go get a chicken from the market. They had the block where you'd cut its head off and run around and, all that stuff. So she would tell all these stories about what my great-grandmother, we called her Busha, what she would teach my mother. And she'd teach her all those old Polish recipes, the way she made them. Now, my mother had 3 boys. She didn't think we should be in the kitchen. She was always yelling at us, saying we'd get hair in the food. It's not a problem anymore for me or any of my brothers. But she never let us in on those old recipes, those things, right? But now my middle brother, he has 2 daughters. And my mother brings them over every weekend. They put on babushkas, and she's teaching them those same recipes that her grandmother taught her. And it struck me that isn't that just passing down culture? Those are the things we would eat growing up. My mom would always have a story about them while we were eating. Of course, as kids, we didn't want to hear those stories. We just wanted to eat and go play. Now you wish, of course, you could have saved all those. So it struck me that food is one of those fundamental ways that we pass along our history and our culture from generation to generation. But we don't always realize that's what's happening, right? It was always, well, you did it this way, well, you did it that way. Food, of course, isn't static, though. It changes. So we know when people come to a new place, they try to keep their old recipes, but maybe they don't have access to ingredients. Maybe the way you cook is different. There's all different manners. So we look at food not just as a preservation of history and culture, but also as documenting how groups adapt and adjust to new places. And all of that is seen through the recipes. Now, I realize there's a lot of people like my mother who have these recipes all in their head and not written down. And they don't use measurements, neither imperial nor metric. It is a dash of this, a little of that, a handful of this, a handful of that. And of course, they've been doing this for decades, so they know what that feels like. There's that muscle memory, there's that kind of knowledge. But for me, and I'm a pretty I want to know precisely what I got to do here and there, a dash of this and a pinch of that doesn't work. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we wanted to tell Hoosier stories and we wanted to tell them on an individual level, we would be in a position to help you tell your story. And there are many ways to do that, food being one, oral histories, the oral tradition being another, our material culture, the stuff we leave behind, right? It's probably once a week, a box arrives in the mail for me, and it's a bunch of stuff. And who knows what it is, but somebody was cleaning out their parents' attic, either preparing to move them or they had passed away, and they saw Indiana, so they said, oh, well, the Indiana Historical Society might want it, so they give it to us. Sometimes it's great, sometimes not. Just depends. But we hear this also from our friends who run funeral homes. They'll often have kids of a parent who died, and they say, what do I do with all their stuff? Well, of course, they say give it to the Indiana Historical Society, thus the boxes. But we think about those too, photographs, textiles, three-dimensional things, dishes, or maybe a house or something like that. But material culture, and then finally music. We have all those traditional musics. I know Christmas time, we got to roll out all the classics. With my family, of course, one of the favorites, not a Polish song, but Santa Must Be Polish. Have you ever heard that? Santa must be Polish. He's such a jolly guy. He's dressed in red and white. All right, that's okay. Look it up on iTunes. Not as good as, there's one about an Italian Christmas donkey. That's another good one if you get a chance. So we wanted to look at those various ways that we collect personal history. So music, material culture, oral tradition, and food. And thus the idea for the kitchen. We thought, gosh, wouldn't this be an interesting idea if we could do two things here. First, demonstrate Hoosier recipes. So whether you're talking about sugar cream pie or tenderloins or I just learned the other day there's a special kind of Indiana chili. I don't know, when we grew up, ours was Hormel. So, but there's a special Indiana chili. So we think about all those Hoosier traditions and we want to demonstrate them, we want to show them. Think about during Festival of Trees, how many people, different cultures, different religions, you name it, have holiday traditions. Whatever holiday or even no holiday, they tend to practice in the winter months as opposed to the summer months and what have you. So we wanted to show all of Indiana's unique and diverse traditions through food. The other side of this would be something more personal, and we wanted to create opportunities for individuals to use the space to record their own family's traditions. So in my case, I'd have my mom come in and she would show me how she makes kluski. If you don't know kluski, it's a noodle dish that Polish people use. But when you make it, you don't roll out noodles or cut them, you just pinch out of the dough all the time. But there's a technique they use. I have no idea what that is, but the thought being, well, gosh, we could record my mother doing this and then save it and then pass it down generation after generation after generation. So now when she says a pinch or a handful, we can literally see that, okay, that's roughly this amount or that amount. So that was our thought here. We want to show Indiana stories, but we want to help people tell their own personal stories. And I think food is one of the most intimate and personal ways to do that. You think about it, like if you're in a family or any holiday or any gathering, how much is food part of that? Now sometimes that's just going to KFC and getting a bucket of chicken. Sometimes it's actually taking a lot of time and baking or making something that is specific to the season and to the tradition. So we were very excited to do this. Of course, as you can see, we've got a lot of cookbooks in the collection. And cooking has been with us, well, I mean, we all got to eat, right? So that was the impetus for this idea. Now, we got a grant to do this from the Clues Foundation, so we were really excited. It is iterative, so we're trying this out. We're making headway. Bethany and her staff have been doing a great job. We'll continue to evolve this as we learn what we're doing and how this works. But nonetheless, we're excited about it, and we're happy to be sharing this today with you. So, with any questions for me?
Yes. Has the program actually started that you've had participants from the community come in and do something?
No, we've done some demonstrations. We're getting our legs underneath us, but you guys are kind of one of the first audiences to see this. Other questions? All right. Bethany.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us and joining us for a little bit of our pivot. Much of what I'm going to say is actually going to echo what Jody just said. This is one of my favorite initiatives that we've gotten started here, in part because my experiences with my grandma are very similar to Jody with his, although my grandma was a very big fan of girls only in the kitchen, girls only cleaning up, so I was the one learning from my grandma instead. With me today, I've got Derek, who's going to be my sous chef, and he's going to help hand me some materials as we walk through some of our recipes. So I've got two recipes. One we'll definitely get to today. The other one I'm just going to talk about, but if you stick around after Donut Club, you'll get to see that one in action. One of the things that I have really loved about this mobile kitchen is its medium of storytelling. As Jody mentioned, we have brought it out and tested it on a few different occasions. We've had a community partner to come in and test it just so we can get our legs under us and really see how this could be utilized. Telling stories is so vital to what we do, not only at the Indiana Historical Society, but as people. people sharing our culture, sharing our history. And I'll share a little bit about my grandma. Because I've mentioned her, my grandma passed in 2016 after a very long and difficult battle with Alzheimer's. And before she passed, she worked with my cousins who lived in Missouri and created this cookbook. You are welcome to come peruse as much as you want. This cookbook has become the staple of my family. It is filled with all of the recipes that my family had at every one of our family gatherings. Now, my grandma had 8 children. My dad was one of 14 siblings, large German Catholic families there in the backwoods of Missouri. They were also on the side of the river that didn't have a bridge. You could only get into Jefferson City, the next largest town, maybe once every month or 2 if you could afford the ferry. So all of their recipes were based off of what you could get on their farm or from their neighbors or what you could adapt. When they recorded the recipes, that then translated into that. There's been some adaptations over time, especially as the bridge got built over the Osage, and so then they could get into Jefferson City and start to get things a little bit easier. But as my cousins transcribed, there are instructions missing because my grandma didn't always give instruction. It just, you followed what she did. Or my cousins would translate things as a grandma-sized pinch of flour. Well, that's great for someone like me who learned how to cook alongside my grandma. But for someone like my 6-year-old niece who never got to meet my grandma and wants to learn how to make her famous cinnamon roll recipe, she has no concept of what a grandma-sized pinch of flour is because her grandma is my mom, and my mom had much larger hands than my grandma did. So that means that the recipe doesn't quite work the way that she intended it to. I then become that translator for my niece and get to share those stories of going to Missouri over the summers, getting to experience what being outside of the city was, and getting to be on that farm every summer growing up. So the recipe from my grandma that we're going to make today, second, is zucchini bread. The thing that my mom inherited was always having a garden. And full transparency, I still have zucchini in my freezer that she grated and needed to get used, and so that's why we're making zucchini bread as our second recipe today, because I'm gonna go see her on Sunday and I guarantee I'm about to get some more fresh zucchini. So needed to clear that out. But the recipe that we're going to make first is actually inspired from historic cookbooks. Who knows the L.S. Ayres department store and tea room? I thought we might. A staple here in Indiana, a staple here in Indianapolis. I, as you may have gathered, am not from Indiana, nor am I from Indianapolis. I'm from Missouri. So when I first moved here to go to college about 14 years ago now, I managed to get a job over at the Indiana State Museum, and that was my first taste of the majesty of the tea room. I started in education, I started as floor staff, interacting with guests, and you may have seen me annually at the tea room dressed as an elf entertaining children during the holiday season. So I didn't learn the history of the tea room, I learned the stories of families enjoying the tea room, interacting with guests, interacting with children. And that was my connection, which is still a very valuable connection to history. But I didn't understand the history of the department store, the history of the tea room, why the State Museum had a recreation of the tea room. I didn't know any of that. I just knew that kids wanted to come there, and parents and grandparents wanted to bring their kids to share some of those family stories, right? Those family stories that they had growing up and those memories. So I eventually move over to the Historical Society. I start to do research into the tea room. This initiative gets introduced, and I discover the L.S. Ayres Tea Room Cookbook. This is based on the recipes that were made in the tea room. So if you don't have a copy of this, I know Becky would love to sell you one in the history market. But it also contains recollections of people who worked in the tea room and worked in the department store, people who visited the department store, all of that. It also, of course, has recipes. Now, my grandparents had a farm. My mom raised on that farm. My grandma made a chocolate cake every 2 days because the boys would go out, they would do all the farm chores, and they were so exhausted they deserved cake every day. The girls didn't get cake every day, it was just the boys. So growing up, as my family moved all around the country, we moved like clockwork every 2 years while my grandparents stayed stable in Missouri. That was the connection my mom kept, was making a chocolate cake every holiday to help keep us connected. Now, I love chocolate, but what I love more than that is lemon. And we did not get lemon desserts because my mom did not like lemon. So as I was looking for recipes, one thing stood out to me, and that was the lemon luscious pie. I have become known, as I became an adult, for making lemon desserts for my family, so that there was a little bit more variety than just the chocolate. I would always make lemon bars, and I don't know if you've ever made lemon bars. They take a lot of eggs, they take a lot of time. It is a very involved process. This has now become my favorite thing to bring because it is so easy. It's like a 15-20 minute tops recipe. You stick it in the fridge to set for 3 hours, and it is the most delicious thing. Now, the other thing to know about me is I'm not a recipe purist. I have no attachment to recipes, so if things need to change for my taste, I do it. I don't keep things static just because the recipe says you have to do this. This is one of those cases in which I don't stick with what the recipe tells me. So the recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of lemon juice. And as I mentioned, I really love lemon. And so I measured lemon with my heart, which is as much lemon zest as feels right, and as much lemon juice feels right that day. Today feels like a 4 lemon kind of day. So this recipe, as I said, is super easy because if you make lemon bars, you end up needing about a dozen eggs. This only needs 3, and it just needs the egg yolks. So, Derek, if you want to grab the sugar, as well as the milk and 3 eggs, we're going to get started here. Now, someone asked, I believe you asked if we've had partners do this. We have had some community partners come in, and an example of one that I wanted to share was the Burmese American Cultural Center. If you've never heard of this organization, they not only help with Burmese populations who have been forcibly displaced from their home and are refugees, but also those who have not been forcibly displaced and have chosen to come. And the Burmese American Cultural Center came here in May, and they shared Mot Kiarsi, which is a recipe from their homeland. It's kind of like a coconut dessert dish. And one of the things that they talked about was how much they gravitated towards that recipe because you couldn't get most of the ingredients naturally in Meijer or Target or Trader Joe's. You had to go to a Burmese store, a Burmese-owned store, and you could only get the ingredients specially ordered. And so it is a recipe that connects them to their home while they are displaced. Now, my family is of course German. I have had the fortune to go to Germany and get to try some of the actual German recipes. I will tell you, I still don't like sauerkraut, whether my grandma made it, whether my mom made it, or whether it was authentic in Germany, I still don't like sauerkraut. But for those groups that have been removed from their homes, these recipes that they are sharing down in their communities, from their families, from their children, through their adults, that is how they stay connected to their homelands without having that ability to go there. And that's, again, one of my favorite things about this kitchen, is that flexibility for not only them to share their stories, for them to share their recipes with us. They provided recipe cards, as I have up here, of some of my family recipes. They provided those recipes so that those who may never go to Burma may never get to experience Mot Kiarsi got to try it or try some variations on it so that they could have a little taste of Burma and understand that population just a little bit better.
So that's one of the recipes on the table?
That is not, but I can get that to Kimberly and get that sent out. The two recipes I have on the table are my grandma's famous cinnamon roll recipe, as well as the zucchini bread recipe today. And so we've got two different bread-based. My grandma was very big on breads. She made, obviously since you couldn't go into the city, you had to make your own bread. And so she made fresh bread every 3 days. It was 12 loaves every single time, and they went through it every 3 days. As we continue here, I'll tell you one of the other recipes that we tried. So one of the other things that we have done is we have explored some of those historic recipes through Indiana's history. Obviously, we've got the Ellis Ayres Tea Room Cookbook, my family's, which is obviously not Indiana-based. But if you have never heard of Shinzo Oki, he was a Japanese-American man from up near Columbia City. And during the time of Japanese-American internment, the community basically fought back and said, you will not eject this man, you will not remove him from our community, he is a valuable asset. Well, he was a valuable asset for a lot of reasons. Not just because he was a wonderful community member. He also owned the Shoyu, the Shoyu Company, famous for their soy sauces, and one of, I'll say the pioneers, I'm sure historians will correct me, I think he's a pioneer, in creating cookbooks based on cultural recipes for people who do not know that culture. And so he really pioneered the half-stick butter, and then cornstarch. He pioneered bringing in Japanese recipes to Indiana's diet. And so one of the things that we did in May is I fulfilled exactly what he was trying to do. He, through his historic recipe of his Shoyu cookbook recipe, which we do have in our collection. It is available digitally through our collection, so you can actually download and try those recipes yourself. I made his chop suey. I don't know that it tasted as good as it would have with the proper, Shoyu branded soy sauce, Shoyu branded 3 other ingredients that were required, so I had to do some adaptations there. But it was a way to demonstrate how, even if you are not part of a culture or a community, we still utilize those recipes and those cookbooks, some of which are in our collection and that we continue to use, to better understand the communities that are around us.
These Shoyu products, are they from the 40s and 50s? Is that when they were on the show?
Yes, I believe the company actually stayed in business until around the 1970s before it went out. As we continue to make our lovely lemon pie today, this will take just a bit to start heating up. What questions do you have for me? What can I answer about this fun initiative?
How will people access the videos you make of the participants?
Yeah, so at the moment we haven't filmed any of our participants. We have a couple different routes depending upon the ultimate who is being recorded and what the purpose is. So for example, if it is someone coming in, as Jody mentioned, maybe his mom coming and recording a recipe, that might be just a video that they keep. If it is something that the Burmese American Cultural Center comes in, we may record that and have that on YouTube so that it is more freely accessible. Some of them may be just on that member video wall, on that member portal, so that they are an added bonus for our members to learn some of those recipes. That's going to be part of our iteration, is figuring out where each video should live as they get started and how they should be transmitted. What other questions do we have today? Yes?
Tell us what you've put in there so far.
Of course. So far, great question. So far, we have put in a cup of sugar. We have put in 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, half a cup of butter. The recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of lemon juice and a 1/4 teaspoon of lemon zest, but as we've discussed, that's not enough. And right now, I am adding 3 egg yolks. So if you remember that 12 eggs required for our lemon bars, 3 egg yolks is a lot more economical and easier to use. As this heats up, what we're going to see is that the cornstarch is actually going to cause all of this to thicken really nicely. And after we get these egg yolks in and our butter melted, we're going to add, so we measure 1 cup of milk. We're going to add 1 cup of milk and mix that all in.
So you're just boiling that to melt the butter?
Correct. You cook it over medium-high heat to get the cornstarch to, there's a scientific reason, I'm sure, why the cornstarch acts at a certain temperature it does, but over medium-high heat, the cornstarch begins to activate and causes that thickening. If you want to grab the sour cream as well. Again, one of those things that I love about this recipe is how quick and easy it is. It goes a lot quicker if I'm not also talking to my friends as I do it. But I don't regret that because I love getting to talk to you guys. As it all thickens up, that's really the longest part of it, is waiting for it to thicken. And I have made this recipe about half a dozen times at this point, and I could not tell you the magic number of how long it takes for it to thicken properly. It's like magic. All of a sudden, I'll be stirring, because you need to stir it constantly so it doesn't scald on the bottom. All of a sudden, you'll be stirring, and then, like magic, it just thickens up. As it thickens, you actually fold in the sour cream. If you want to move all of this into that bin down there, I'll take the sour cream. Thank you very much, Derek. That last step is folding in your sour cream. It turns it into this gorgeous creamy mixture. And once Derek has put all of that in my wash bin, it's another fun anecdote for you. My husband did not grow up the same way I did, obviously. He did not cook. No one in his family cooked. They were a KFC kind of family that if there's a holiday, you go to the fast food store, you get your food, and that's it. You're not doing homemade recipes. So he learned to cook from me. And my husband has ADHD, and he's chaotic, is my favorite way to describe him. His version of cooking is let me leave everything out everywhere and just dirty as many dishes. While I would not claim to be a clean cook by any stretch of the imagination, I am someone who prefers to keep a little bit organized. So while we wait for this to thicken, if you want to grab our finished product, we're going to show that.
I have a question.
Of course.
What if you know somebody that has some good family recipes? Is there a way to get them in contact with you? Or the
Yeah. For now, you can email programs at Indiana History. That goes straight to me, because my last name's a bit of a bear to remember how to spell. And I did not bring my business cards down, I apologize. Or you can email Kimberly, and she can get them to me. I'm always looking for new recipes to try. I won't say they'll go in a collection, but I always love to learn new recipes, and any family stories that you have, I would love to hear those as well.
A related question, in addition to recipes, as far as individuals potentially participate in the program, will you be advertising, or how will you spread the word to locate people that might be potentially a source for your program?
Yeah, for right now, we've been doing a little bit of who are the community members we know that are willing to take a leap of faith with us and try. One of the biggest things we have encountered, or one of the challenges we have encountered when working particularly with communities where English is not their first language, how do you describe what this is to communities where they don't understand English to begin with, or their grasp on it is a little bit more difficult. And so you see here, it's already now starting that thickening as it begins to bubble. We have been doing that word of mouth, and we have some short, like 1-minute videos recorded, as well as photos, to be able to share to our community members, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're meaning when we describe this kitchen, so that it lowers that bar of entry for them. We may have eventually more of a, application process of, oh, would you like to be a part? There might be that application. There may be a reach out to get scheduled. I don't know, Jody, do you have any insights into maybe how that family, if people wanted to do that part?
Well, I don't know that we are quite ready for that. Being part of the Donut Club, you get to see stuff in advance of the general public. So give us maybe 6 months, and then just reach out to us, and you can reach out to Bethany or myself, and we'd be happy to figure out how to make that happen. We should be ready for that then.
Perfect. Thank you, Jody.
Oh, I should warn you, there is a fee for that.
So does the grant include more than one camera, or is it a single camera? How do you plan to actually film it? Because I see you have the above thing where you can look down, and then do you know how the production will work?
We had received funds for the construction of a learning studio, which did allow us to purchase some additional equipment. So even if this particular grant did not afford for the purchase of the camera, we do have, through other funding opportunities, additional iPads, DSLR cameras like what Ed's filming on today, and GoPros and things like that to help facilitate. So things like a GoPro can more easily, you can, not to get too difficult, you can get a rig and mount it and look down, almost like a document camera style filming. Through the iPads, we can do a little bit more angling in order to get different filming angles. If you want to hand me the powdered sugar. To finish off our recipe today, as you can see, we have just put it in our pie shell, and so it just sits in there and sets. So Derek, if you want to very carefully stick that one in the fridge. As I mentioned, I'm not a recipe purist, so to finish off our recipe today, first off, it calls for a baked pie shell. I said I don't like that. I want it to be more of a lemon bar flavor and texture, so I use a shortbread crust. I did not make my shortbread crust today, but you can make your own shortbread crust. It just adds more time to the recipe. It also says to top it with whipped cream and walnuts. I don't have walnuts, I have pecans, because frankly I'm bringing leftovers home to my dad on Sunday because he was in the hospital last week and I feel like he deserves a little bit of pie. So I have pecans for him instead, which are his favorite. And instead of the whipped cream, again, to create a little bit more of that lemon bar flavor and texture, I just top it with a light dusting of powdered sugar. And so then as it gets cut, everyone gets a delicious, fluffy flavor of lemon, shortbread, and powdered sugar. And that is our Lemon Luscious pie today.
So nothing is baked, it's just when it's ready, you put it in a refrigerated environment till it sets up.
Correct. Yeah, that's again one of my favorite things about this. Especially on a hot summer day, you don't have to turn the oven on. It's just one pan on the stove top, stick it in the fridge, depending on your fridge, 2 to 3 hours, and then it's all done. So it's a really nice and easy one. If you got a last minute invitation to somewhere in the afternoon and you need to bring something, it's very quick and easy to make, so long as you keep lemons around. But you can also use the pre-juiced lemons.
I just have a question. This is just, I don't know very much about cooking, but you put raw eggs in there and then you didn't cook it, you put it in the refrigerator. Do you worry about food safety without cooking it?
Yeah, I would, but tried and true, they tell me to cook it over medium-high heat. The scientific thing is, I think because it is cooked over the medium-high heat until it boils, there is enough of a heat that in the egg yolk, it fully kills any salmonella.
So you take care of that before you put it in the refrigerator?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Otherwise, the recipe tells me to, and I just trust the recipe.
I
Yeah.
thought, what do I want to eat that?
Well, the eggs got cooked.
Exactly. They cook over the.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Very valid question, though. What else can I answer today?
Searching cookbooks from the library, are they digitized or?
Yeah, some of them are digitized, some are not. And so unfortunately, Susan Sutton would have been a much better person to answer this question more fully. But for example, the Show You cookbook, that one is fully digitized. I don't believe many of our cookbooks are fully digitized. I think there are one-off recipes throughout some of the selections that Susan pulled, but in full, I don't know that we have many full cookbooks online. But I know Susan and the rest of our library team would be very excited to have you come in and either scan or photograph your own from those cookbooks.
Is there a separate cookbook collection or no section where these, are they scattered here, there, and everywhere?
Yeah, my understanding of the organization is that they're a little scattered through the archive. I don't know that they have a full in the library reference collection.
So you bought the crust?
Yes.
Right? Is that graham cracker? You're saying is that a graham cracker? Because I've not seen a shortbread.
Yeah, it is,
Crust.
that Keebler brand?
Yeah.
Same thing, it's a Keebler brand shortbread version. I have one store that I have been able to find it at. And so yes, I did drive way out of the way to the Meijer off of Main Street in Carmel in order to get the shortbread crust for today. Because it is so worth it. There may be other stores that also carry it, but for example, the Kroger right around the corner here did not have shortbread crust. And so it's something that I've only been able to find hit or miss in stores. Graham cracker would also be good. I haven't tried it with chocolate, but I know Keebler also does a chocolate pie crust. They also have a pecan walnut mixed crust. Haven't tried it on that yet either. I'll just have to come back and do more. Any other questions for today? If not, I want to thank you all so much for coming, for pivoting with us and going along for the ride, and getting to learn a little bit more about our mobile kitchen initiative. And I hope you'll come back for more demonstrations in the future as we continue to grow.
Thank you.